afternoon. We would like to start the proceedings. Can you please take your seats so that we can start? So, as usual in a joint meeting, first we had the Plants Committee doing its work this week, but now before we can have a joint meeting, we have to start the Animals Committee meeting. So the next few items will be the starting of the Animals Committee. That's why we also only do have Animals Committee members sitting down here. And we will start the Animals Committee with my opening remarks. I would like to welcome everybody here in Geneva, first for the joint meeting of the PC and AC, and then of course for the Animals Committee meeting next week. We do have a very heavy agenda before us. In this regard, I wanted to express my deep appreciation to the Secretariat for preparing all these documents and pulling all the material together for us to work on them. I also want to thank the topic leads and working group chairs of the AC and PC for the joint ones, and the AC for the only AC ones, as well as all the participants in these working groups for their time and effort. The topics and issues given to us by COP19 and our resolutions are manifold and range from the normal and crucial processes under Resolution Conf 12.8 on the review of significant trade, Resolution Conf 14.8 on the periodic review of CITES listed species, and for the Animals Committee only, Resolution Conf 17.7 on captive breeding, up to issues on non-CITES listed species. We will also see the comprehensive results of the long process of developing guidance on the making of NDFs, non-detriment findings, a very important step in supporting exporting parties to comply with the requirements of a sustainable trade under CITES. Other topics of a more strategic nature, where the scientific committees are tasked to provide input and share their views, include the IPES assessment on the use of wild species and the consequences for our convention, strategic vision and its role to support the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, or also the role of CITES in reducing the risk of future zoonotics. We will also have to deal with several species-specific matters on leopards, lions, sharks, eels, pangolins, seahorses, just to name a few. And we'll of course also discuss a lot of nomenclatural issues in the joint and also in the Animals Committee. Nomenclatural science is moving at a very rapid pace, and as a CITES community we have to try to keep up with all these developments without at the same time complicating the workings of the convention. And finally, quite some effort has gone into analyzing the trade in non-CITES listed animal species, such as marine ornamental fishes, songbirds or amphibians. We will, as a committee, have to decide how we continue such work, besides the mandate we already have on all CITES-listed taxa. In this regard, I want to voice my concerns that the parties are giving the scientific committees more and more tasks to accomplish, several of which are on non-CITES-listed species. However, at the same time, parties do not give the Secretariat the resources to prepare the documents and works that are necessary to accomplish those tasks. In addition, the resources of the committee members themselves are also not increasing. As a committee, we have to be mindful of this state of play whenever we are taking decisions to continue work or to propose new decisions for additional work. As for how I intend to manage the proceedings of the meeting, my intention will be to have a broad participation of members, observer parties, as well as observer organizations to get a good sense of the views around the topic before we take a final decision. In view of our large agenda, this means also that I have to restrict the speaking times from the beginning. This means that for observer parties, speaking time will be limited to 3 minutes, and for IJOs and NJOs it will be 2 minutes. Please adhere to this timing, as otherwise I will have to interrupt your interventions, something I really don't like to do. And if I do, I will not do that out of disrespect of your opinions and views, but out of respect to all others who may wish to intervene and submit their views for our consideration. And as a small reminder about the roles of the Animals Committee members, they are designated by their regions and are here as experts in their personal capacities. It will be these individuals sitting here in front who will be making the decisions at this meeting. It's their task to do that. But before we start our proceedings, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary General of CITES to make some opening remarks from her side. So, Yvonne, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Chair of the Animals Committee, members of the Animals Committee, distinguished delegates and participants, dear colleagues and friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 33rd meeting of the CITES Animals Committee. We extend our warm thanks to you for traveling to Geneva to join us here. We are most grateful to the government of Switzerland for their generous financial support to hold the meeting here at CICG, where we have exceptionally 7 days of meetings ahead of us. To the members of the committee, I thank you for committing your time, contributing your scientific and technical expertise, and generously providing advice to support the decisions adopted by the COP. Your dedication and expertise are vital in fulfilling the purpose of the convention. We rely on you to guide us through the complexities of the core CITES processes and provide sound scientific advice to inform discussions. We thank you for your support and dedication, not just at the meeting, but throughout the intersessional period, guiding or chasing working groups to move the work forward. We have an impressive turnout for this meeting, with 76 parties and 318 delegates registered, along with 88 organizations represented by 165 participants. This demonstrates our collective passion and dedication to the work of CITES, which is also mirrored by the rich agenda. 20 different documents will be discussed during the joint session of the Animals and Plants Committees, and over 40 additional documents will be discussed by the Animals Committee on its own. Almost 2 years have passed since the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and much progress has been made, as evidenced by the volume of documents. And I'll say a little bit about that as well a little later. The agenda meeting is extensive, featuring species from across the globe, African vultures to jaguars and queen conch to seahorses, as well as circumglobal shark species. Key agenda items include strategic matters such as the CITES Strategic Vision, World Wildlife Trade Report, along with updates on initiatives like the joint CITES CMS African Carnivore Initiative and the Big Cat Task Force. The two committees will discuss several cross-cutting issues, including the new comprehensive guidance on non-detriment findings that was developed through a highly collaborative process involving the committee members, parties, and observers. This valuable new resource will serve as a useful tool for parties to ensure that international trade in CITES-listed species is sustainable. The Animals Committee has species-specific matters to address for 14 different taxa across aquatic and terrestrial species. Noteworthy items on the agenda include discussions on West African vultures, eels, leopards, tortoises, and freshwater turtles, trade in songbirds, marine ornamental fishes, and sharks and rays. You will also examine matters relating to the regulation of trade, including the making of non-detriment findings for specimens taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction and terms and units for trade in stony corals. The committee will address several core processes of CITES that require thoughtful consideration: the review of significant trade, the review of trade in specimens reported as produced in captivity, the periodic review process, as well as nomenclature issues, which are the backbone to the convention. As the final Animals Committee before the next Conference of the Parties, you have a lot of work to do. However, this is also an exciting time where the committee can help to guide the work for the next intersessional period. I would like to express my deep gratitude for the collaborative and participatory way the work has been delivered by the Animals Committee, supported by observer parties and organizations. My sincere thanks also to the Chair and Vice Chair for their leadership and collegiality. It is always a pleasure working alongside them. At the same time, I am compelled to ask you for your support of the hardworking members of the CITES Secretariat, and I appreciate very much the words of the Animals Committee Chair about this. Over the years, we have seen an exponential growth of the workload of the Secretariat, but without the core financial and human resources needed to keep up with this growth. There are only 3 scientific officers and 1 program assistant supported by the core budget resources and 1 junior officer supported by the trust fund savings as agreed by the COP until 2025. They prepare most documents for these meetings, and we are lucky to have such generous colleagues who get involved in all work and help as much as possible. However, it has become an unsustainable workload, and I fear for their health and well-being. I kindly ask you to please be considerate of the amount of work requested from the Secretariat, especially when it relates to activities that may be outside of the convention's core work. We are finding it more and more challenging to have the time to do the core work of this convention, which is servicing the meetings, implementing the program of work, and providing technical advice and support to the parties. With this kind request, I hereby inform you that our dear Elena Kivanskaya has retired, and Ms. Olga Montero is now the documents assistant. We are fortunate that Elena is able to accompany us during the Plants and Animals Committee meetings, so please wish her good luck in this new chapter of her life and welcome Olga to her new job. Also, our dear Juan Carlos Vasquez has taken a brave step in his career after 29 years with the CITES Secretariat. He started as an intern with the CITES Secretariat. He has joined UNEP in Nairobi on the 1st of July. Sophie Flensburg has been selected on a temporary appointment as chief of the legal unit, and we give her our congratulations. And finally, we have wonderful new interns, and you will see them working hard to support the meetings. I have some additional good news to give you, and that is that Uzbekistan has kindly offered to host the meeting of COP20. This offer was discussed by the Standing Committee in an online meeting in late June, and the Standing Committee has instructed the Secretariat to work with Uzbekistan to develop the host country agreement, and in this context ensure that the suggested venue is sufficient to host the COP, the CITES COP. A site visit by the Secretariat will be carried out later this month, and the Secretariat will issue a notification about the venue and date of the COP20 in due course. I am sure we all extend our gratitude to Uzbekistan for their generous offer. Finally, some sad news. Yes, before the sad news. Finally, I let you know with a sense of sadness that this will be the last meeting of the Animals Committee that our chair, Matthias Lorcher, will be sitting here on the podium to chair. He was elected as chair of the Animals Committee in 2016, and after this meeting will have chaired 5 Animals Committee meetings between COP17 and COP20. That is AC29 to AC33, including during the challenging COVID-19 pandemic. We all remember the cat. Matthias has now retired from his position in the Swiss Management Authority, and while we wish him well on his retirement and thank him for his service to the Animals Committee over the years, we are very happy that he will continue in his position as chair until the next COP. Thanks to Switzerland for that, including for the Standing Committee in February 2025. However, this will be his official last meeting of the Animals Committee, so I hope that you will all help him to make it a memorable and successful one. Now, before we all get emotional, yes. So let's leave those emotions and tears for later. And for now, I wish you a productive and enjoyable meeting. You have a very busy agenda, so let's take this opportunity to work together constructively and effectively to guide us towards a harmonious relationship with nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yvonne, for these nice words. And before we move on to the agenda items, I would give the floor to the Secretariat for some housekeeping announcements. So, Sophie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Animals Committee. Some of you will have heard these comments before, but since we have quite a few additional new people in the room, I'm going to repeat some of what I said last Monday. First of all, you will have seen and noted that we have put your name placards across the room, and they may feel like they're far apart, but this is important, and that you don't move them. So don't move your name placard and don't move to another seat in the room, because we will not be able to give you the floor, as the microphones have been mapped against these nameplates. So please remain seated where the nameplate is. If you have a delegation that is too big to fit the 4 seats that are allocated to your party, or fewer seats allocated to observers, there are some seats in the back of the room. And if they're full too, we'll invite you to go outside and watch the live stream. The Secretariat is live streaming this meeting, and so it's possible to also follow the proceedings from outside of the room. Secondly, I need to tell you how the microphones work. So when you request the floor, your microphone will turn red. And when we give you the floor, green, actually, they will turn green. And when the chair has given you the floor, it will turn red, and then you will be able to speak. Please don't press the button again, because then you will fall off the list of speakers, and it is not possible for us to give you the floor. When you do speak, please note that these microphones are extremely sensitive. So it's important that you don't speak completely like this to the microphone, because it's not possible for the interpreters to hear what you say. Please keep a distance of about 20 centimeters from the microphone when you speak. Last little ask from the Secretariat. If you do have written speaking notes, we would be grateful if you could send them to us in advance. So it's a lot easier for both the Secretariat and the interpreters to follow. So kindly send any speaking notes to the email info@cites.org, as well as any editorial comments and text that you would like to read out when you have the floor, so that it's possible to follow for the interpreters. So send these to info@cites.org as soon as you have your written comments in English, French, or Spanish, doesn't matter. Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for this housekeeping information. And please really be patient. When you press the button, you will be called, and you don't have to do anything else once you have pressed the button. Okay, so we will start with agenda item 1, declaration of conflict of interest. And here I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. And there was one last housekeeping comment that I forgot to mention. The Chair will call upon you in the order of members, observer parties, and observers. Please do not press the button until you have been called upon, because the list fills up on our screens and we won't be able to see you. So first members, observer parties, and observers, and don't press the button too soon. Coming to agenda item 1 on declaration of conflict of interest, I am pleased to confirm that the Secretariat has received the declaration of conflict of interest from all the members of the Animals Committee, and none of the members have declared any financial interest that they consider call into question their impartiality, objectivity, or independence regarding any subject of the agenda for this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for this information. So with this, we would move to the second agenda item, which is rules of procedure. And in relation to this, I would invite the members of the committee to take note that the current rules of procedure of the Animals Committee, as amended at its 30th meeting in Geneva in July 2018 and contained in the annex to document AC33 Doc 3, remain valid for this meeting. Any comments on that, members? No. Parties? Observers? Okay, so we would note, Oceania has asked for the floor. Oceania, you have the floor.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Referring back to the conflict of interest, I declared a conflict of interest in that I work for the Department of Conservation in New Zealand, and we do captive breeding of Cyanoramphus malherbi for release programs into the wild, so not for any trade. So even though I declared the conflict of interest, I don't believe it affects my involvement in this meeting, but I just thought I'd clarify that is the case. And also, while I've got the floor, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for all the work they've put into all the papers. And as Vice Chair, I'd like to wish Mateus the best of health for the next week and a half, and also many years to come after he's retired. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also do think that your conflict of interest is not really the conflict of interest in the sense as it is noted in the rules. So yeah, thank you for this information. And thank you for your health wishes. I also hope I will at least stay healthy until the end of this meeting and a little bit longer. Thanks. Okay. So in relation to the rules of procedure, I think the Animals Committee notes its rules of procedure as amended at its 30th meeting and contained in the annex to document AC30.3, and that they remain valid for the present meeting. So we then move on to agenda item 3, which is the agenda. And here the agenda is contained in document AC33.3. And the Animals Committee is invited to adopt the agenda. So I open the floor for any comments on the agenda. Animals Committee members, observer parties, observer organizations. Okay, so we don't have any amendments. So the Animals Committee adopts the agenda as contained in document AC33.3. Then we can move on to agenda item 4, the working program. So for this, I would give the floor to the Secretariat. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. The Animals Committee is now invited to adopt the working program, which can be found in document AC33.4, Ref 1. The Secretariat published a revised working program on 20 June 2024. The revised version included times for registration, and some items were moved to earlier slots in the agenda to ensure that there is sufficient time to address all the items that we have to discuss. The only substantial change was that the agenda item on the role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international trade, which was originally on the working program in the joint session, was moved to the afternoon session of the Animals Committee on Monday, 15 July, as the content is entirely focused on fauna issues. The Animals Committee is invited to adopt the working program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for any comments from members. Observer parties. I see Israel has asked for the floor. Israel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, since it's my first time taking the floor, I want to thank, of course, the Secretariat for preparing the documents for this meeting and congratulate you, of course, on your continued work as Chair of this committee. The issue of the zoonotic disease was raised in Standing Committee, and for some strange reason, the Standing Committee gave a mandate to both Animals Committee and Plants Committee to discuss the issue, and it's in the decision that came out of Standing Committee. So it's still on the mandate of the Plants Committee, which is the reason why it was initially put into the joint session here. I agree with you that there's not much logic to having it addressed by Plants Committee, but that was the logic. So There may be, at some point, Plans Committee does have to make some comment, even just to say that we're not really dealing with this because it's not an issue, and get that back to Standing Committee. But that was the original decision that came out of Standing Committee for some reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I think we have been giving a lot of thought about that, where it should be discussed, but I can give the floor to the Secretariat on that matter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Israel, for raising this. I would like to recall that at the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, the Plants Committee actually did discuss this matter and agreed that it would nominate members of the Plants Committee to participate in the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group to ensure they are informed, and that was agreed by the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee as per the summary record and the executive summaries. Thank you.
So I think this ensures that if the Plans Committee has an appetite for dealing with this issue, it will be put into that working group. And I think that this way the will of the COP to have a decision including both committees will be satisfied by doing it so. Okay. Any other observer party asking for the floor on this matter? Observer organization? None? Okay, so the Animals Committee adopts the working program as set out in document AC33, Doc 4. Agenda item 5, next agenda. Doc 4, Rev 1. Okay, agenda item 5, admission of observers. Here also I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with Rule 4, Paragraph 2 of the Rules of Procedures of the Animals Committee, any body or agency technically qualified in protection, conservation, or management of wild fauna and flora wishing to be represented at a meeting of a committee by observers shall submit a request to the Secretariat at least 30 days before the meeting. The document you have in front of you contains the list of these observer organizations, and the Animals Committee is invited to take note of the list of observers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Any comments from members, observer parties, observer organizations? Okay, so the Animals Committee notes document AC33, Doc 5. This concludes the opening of the Animals Committee meeting. So now we will be joined by the members of the Plants Committee. So now you are allowed back onto the front seats. So please, members of the Plants Committee, rejoin your seats. We will have a short break until everyone is seated, and then we will continue the work. Thank you. Deliberation, so you have 1 minute to get seated and then we will start. Okay. I would like to welcome everyone to the joint meeting of the Plants Committee and Animals Committee. And we have the agenda before us. I don't think I will have to say any more welcoming remarks. We have done that before. We don't need any more cracking voices, so I think we will start right away with agenda item PC27 Doc 16 and AC33 Doc 16 on NDFs. I give the floor to the Secretary to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. Document PC27 Doc 16/AC33 Doc 16 presents progress in the implementation of the CITES NDF project since PC26 and AC32 as currently mandated in decisions 19132 and 19133. Since before COP18, the Secretariat undertook a gap analysis of available NDF guidance and proposed draft decisions to update and improve CITES NDF guidance. Since then, the CITES NDF project has brought together more than 200 experts from parties, observers, committees, the Secretariat, implementing partners to develop new and updated NDF guidance in online work streams and a global workshop that took place in 2023 in Nairobi. Paragraph 4 of the document and Annexes 1 and 2 inform about the work of the Technical Advisory Group to the CITES NDF project in accordance with Decision 19133A. Paragraph 5 to 8 inform about the progress in drafting NDF guidance and the International Expert Workshop, which was attended by more than 150 participants from 42 parties, including 19 sponsored delegates and 25 observer organizations. Paragraph 9 notes that the workshop could not agree on the interpretation of the term purposes in paragraph 3A of Article 3 of the Convention, and invited the Secretariat to propose draft decisions to request further guidance from the COP, which are available in Annex 3 to the document. Paragraph 13 to 15 provide information on the structure of the CITES NDF guidance and its publication on the CITES website. Paragraph 16 to 18 inform about the next steps with regard to the field testing of the guidance. The Secretariat would like to highlight that we recently published Notification 2024/80 to invite registrations for the first webinar in English and French to introduce CITES NDF guidance with a focus on scientific authorities of Francophone parties and parties in Africa. The webinar will take place on August 21 and further information is available in Notification 2024/80. Paragraphs 19 and 20 contain possible next steps with regard to a strategy and feedback mechanism for future updates of the CITES NDF guidance in accordance with Decision 19132D and 19133D. Draft decisions to this effect are available for the consideration of the committee in Annex 4 to the document. Based on the preceding, the animals and committees are invited to A. Note the progress of the CITES NDF project and the publication of the CITES NDF guidance on the CITES website. B. Advise on any additional amendments to the CITES NDF guidance. C. Agree that decisions 19132 and 19134 have been implemented and propose their deletion to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. D. Consider the draft decisions contained in Annex 3 of the document and Annex 4 of the document. And E. Report their recommendations to the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Members, you have heard what we are asked to do. I would just say a word of caution on letter B. I don't think the idea is that we change the guidance as it has been produced and it is now being used by parties, and because for that we do really have a process that is going on and that we decide by adopting the decisions how this guidance material is being revised. So don't focus really on that, but focus rather on A, C, and D in your deliberations. So with this, I open the floor for members of the Animals Committee. Animals and Plants Committee. Sorry, China. Sorry, Jan. I have to get used to it, sorry. Okay, Plants and Animals Committee. Yes, I see North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The North American region would like to extend our thanks and appreciation to the organizers and participants of the December 2023 International Expert Workshop on NDF Guidance in Nairobi, Kenya. The guidance produced by this workshop is a capacity-building initiative that will be extremely important to ensure optimal implementation of the CITES Convention into the future. As such, the North American region supports the draft decisions in Annex 4 on a feedback mechanism to share experiences with using NDF guidance materials and to review and update NDF guidance materials as may be needed. However, we do not support the draft decision in Annex 3 on the interpretation of Article 3, Paragraph 3A on Appendix I imports. While we acknowledge that the working group on Appendix I imports recommended that further discussions on the interpretation of Article 3.3a is needed, the North American region believes that the guidance produced by the working group on Appendix I imports is a good first step, and that improving this guidance can occur using the feedback mechanism outlined in Annex 4. We therefore encourage parties to consider providing feedback on the use of guidance on making NDFs for Appendix I imports in their response to the notification proposed in Annex 4 and suggest the following amendment to Draft Decision 20.AA, Paragraph a, Subparagraph I. And that subparagraph I would now read, feedback on the use of the CITES non-detriment finding, NDF, guidance, particularly on the use of the guidance for Appendix I imports, with the Secretariat, preferably through the regional representatives of the Animals and Plants Committees. The North American region can also agree that decisions 19.132 to 19.134 have been implemented and that their deletion be proposed to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I note that this intervention has been sent to the Secretariat for reference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, North America. Can you quickly repeat what is being changed? Just one more that everyone can take its notes. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, here. So in draft decision 20.AA, subparagraph a, subparagraph I, the text would read, feedback on the use of the CITES non-detriment finding, NDF, guidance, comma, and then there's new text, particularly on the use of the guidance for Appendix I imports, comma, and then it goes on as before, with the Secretariat, preferably through the regional representatives of the Animals and Plants Committees.
Thank you, North America. That is clear. I now have Asia. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The representatives of Asia would like to thank the Secretary and IUCN for their full commitment and great contribution. I can't imagine that it was only a few years from seeing the frame to having the guidance on the table. And representatives of Asia are honored to be part of this important convention process by joining the TAC and the International Expert Workshop in Nairobi. We will be happy assisting the regional parties in acquiring and test the NDF guidance and providing feedback on the use of the material. And we have also received potential proposals to consider holding various NDF workshops in Asia and look forward to further support and cooperation. With regard to the draft documents of NDF for Appendix I import, the document was reviewed intensively during the meetings of the TAG and at the Nairobi workshops. So we do not support the changes proposed by the North American region with regard to the, especially for the use of the NDF for Appendix I imports, in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Asia. I see Europe. Europe, you have the floor.
Thank you. At first, I want to thank the Secretariat for the huge work of preparing the documents and also for the assistance received during the intersessional working groups. And I confirm my congratulations to the Chair, not only for chairing this meeting, but for leading the Animals Committee through a whole era of successful work. I generally agree with the draft decisions as included in the document. I just want to make one small addition in regard to the problem that according to the current version of the guidance materials, it can be concluded that a species will not fulfill its role in the ecosystem as long as a positive NDF can be made. This obliterates the function of Article 4, Paragraph 3, as it subsumes its considerations under the requirement for preventing a species from becoming extinct. This is a pragmatic shortcut and suitable for low-volume trade, but it cannot be the case for high-volume and persistent trade, especially in situations where populations are reduced or managed at the maximum sustainable yield. Although a viable population will prevent extinction, it might not be capable of fulfilling its role in the ecosystem, such as sufficient pollination, seed dispersal, and other functions. To fulfill its role in the ecosystem, a species might require a higher abundance than just for surviving and for not becoming eligible for inclusion in Appendix I. Accordingly, the Animals Committee might want to advise that an amendment on considering the role of species in the ecosystem would be useful as an addition in the NDF guidance. And a recommendable addition could be somehow included in Annex 3 or 4 of the current document. Thank you.
So to be clear, you're asking that in a future version of the NDF guidance, there might be merit to look more into this issue. I think this is something that can be accommodated within the feedback mechanism process where parties can make that suggestion. I think that would be an elegant way to deal with this question, because that may actually arise, really. Okay. Okay, I see Central, South America and the Caribbean. You have the floor.
Ahora sí. Yeah. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the enormous effort made by the Secretariat and the chairs and members of the Plants and Animals Committees to work on this guidance. I think it's very useful to have this guidance, and we have to think about all the work that scientific authorities or parties have to do. So we support the draft decision that is proposed by the Secretariat. And we certainly think that the feedback mechanism and the workshops are very useful, and it's important to promote the development of face-to-face regional workshops, which give us greater opportunities to exchange experience and share lessons learned so that we can continue strengthening, building, and improving the guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your support. So, any other member wanting to take the floor? Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Africa region thanks the Secretariat for the preparation of the document on non-detriment findings. The Africa region acknowledges the financial and technical support to ensure that the 90 steps approach in Africa are well implemented. Africa region agrees with the draft decision as presented by the Secretariat. With regards to para 21A, we suggested that more capacity building to continue in Africa so that more parties are able get invest knowledge on the NDF 90 steps process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Africa, for your support. So, any other member? I don't see anybody asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer parties. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Japan would like to express its appreciation to the government of Switzerland to host this meeting. And Japan thanks the Secretariat for the preparation of these documents. And Japan would also like to appreciate all the effort made by the TAG and the participants in the NDF workshop held in Nairobi last December. Japan thinks that we had a very practical and useful discussion on NDF with case studies during the workshop. And there are many items described in the modules, but Japan would like to particularly highlight the NDF guidance presented in all modules are not legally binding on parties, and parties can make NDF based on other guidance and approaches as confirmed at the NDF workshop. In addition, Japan also notes that the NDF guidance is flexible and parties might wish to adapt elements on the guidance for their own circumstances as described in the text of the modules. And Japan has one question for clarification on Module 1, which is principles and concepts of NDF. And in section 6.1.2, which is practice of assessing species role in the ecosystem, there's one new item at the end of the first paragraph, which we did not discuss at the ND workshop, as far as I understand. The new item seems F of the change in genetic structure or diversity of the population. So Japan would like to ask the Secretariat or appropriate person to clarify the background of this new addition. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I think it's important to note that this is guidance. It's supposed to support parties in making NDFs. If they have already a system in place that assures the sustainability of use of their species, they don't have to change that if it is already doing what it is supposed to be. It's just really guidance and help for parties to do NDFs. As for your question, detailed question, I think I will let the Secretariat delve on that, think on that, and open the floor for the UK. So UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks for all their work, the Secretariat, all the participants of the non-detriment finding working groups and workshop, and the authors of the guidance documents and supporting information in bringing together updated and improved guidance on making NDFs. We encourage parties to continue to engage with the process, to test the guidance, to provide their NDFs for publication and to feedback on challenges and lessons learned in making these. Regarding the draft decisions presented in Annex 3 of the document, we're supportive of additional guidance in relation to purposes which are not detrimental to the survival of the species. We recognise that parties might have their own interpretations. These may differ, and we regard consistency of application to be desirable. We consider the amendment suggested by the US might be a good and perhaps less time-consuming solution in the continuation of this discussion. Regarding the draft decisions presented in Annex 4 on page 11 of the document, we support the decisions in general, but note that the two indents in 20AA directed to the Secretariat appear to be requesting virtually the same thing, namely to publish a notification inviting parties to provide feedback on how they use NDF guidance. So the UK considers that clarity could perhaps be added by deleting the second indent in paragraph A of DD 20AA directed to the Secretariat, and this reads, examples with the Secretariat and/or regional representatives of the Animals and Plants Committees of how the NDF guidance has been used, and suggest instead just inserting the words including examples as appropriate after feedback in that first indent. So the full sentence could read, it'll be paragraph A, publish a notification to the parties inviting them to share feedback, comma, including examples as appropriate, comma, on the use of the CITES non-detriment finding NDF guidance with the Secretariat, preferably through the regional representatives of the Animals and Plants Committees, and delete and. We can provide this in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. UK, so you would delete AII, huh? Okay, good. And replace it with that, including examples as appropriate. Okay, good. Any other party? Yes, I have China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. China cannot support the amendment proposed by the member of North America. Thank you.
Thank you, China. After United States. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations. Being mindful of the need to reduce CITES workload and not see a need for duplicative work streams, noting that the North American region does not support Annex 3, and Asia did not support the North American amendment to Annex 4, because all guidance, including Appendix I, can be reviewed through Annex 4, we suggest the deletion of Annex 3 would avoid redundancy of process and allow for any comments on Module 4 to be considered through the Annex 4 review process, along with all other modules. This would basically not have then two work streams and avoid a duplication of work. Thank you.
So you are suggesting to delete and to not adopt Annex 3 and also not to add the sentence as read out by the North American region and just leave it up to that process to look at the issue raised in the decision in Annex 3, right? No, okay.
That would be the compromise if we can't accept the North American amendment, because Annex 4 allows you to review all the processes, including Appendix I. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a good suggestion, because so we have the process open for any amendments to any of the guidance that is out there, including the one on Appendix 1. I see nodding from Asia, so you would be in agreement with that proposal from the United States? Yes, Asia, you have.
Thank you, Chair. May I have a little, minutes for me to consider that, since I think the consequence a little bit complex.
I see Oceania has asked for the floor. Oceania, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the suggestion put forward by the United States is a sound one. It does capture and save a lot of debate about the wording of Annex 3. I also agree with the suggestion made by the United Kingdom for that amendment, so I'll support that too. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else asking for the floors, observer parties? I would then move to the observer organizations. You can now press your button if you want to intervene. I see WCS. WCS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't need to be first. I thought there would be many others, and we would like to thank the Secretariat for all the hard work in producing the documents here. And thank you, Chair, for all your hard work all these years, and wish you a productive retirement. And also, in case he's watching the live stream, to thank our friend and colleague Juan Carlos for 29 years of service to this convention, and wish him the best in Nairobi at UNEP. We, WCS, myself in particular, participated actively in the technical advisory group and the Nairobi workshop, and we wish to thank everyone and congratulate everyone for excellent guidance. Yes, this is guidance to the parties. We had agreed with the North American intervention, but we appreciate the compromise and think that the process of feedback from parties will be sufficient to address all of the issues. But in particular, and so we agree with deleting the additional decisions and appreciate the compromise. We would like to specifically agree with the Animals Committee representative from Europe that looking at a species' role in its ecosystem needs to be considered in addition to the NDF guidance that you have before you, which is outstanding as guidance, but should not be seen as a substitute for the obligation of the scientific authorities in ensuring that the species' role in the ecosystem is maintained. So we concur with the suggestion that that be part of future work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, WCS. Anybody else asking for the floor? I don't see any. Can I come back to Asia? Asia, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. After considering also recall what we discussed during the last Nairobi workshop, and I also consult with our experts when they were at that model, and we think it will be acceptable to let the draft now be reviewed, and it will also save our time and workload to not to go the COP for a new set of the decision for developed one. So thank you for the proposal, the compromise. Thank you.
Thank you for your compromise. You're willing to compromise. Thank you very much. So in conclusion, I think we can, let me see what we have to conclude. I think we can note the progress of the CITES NDF project and the publication of the preliminary CITES NDF guidance on the CITES website. Agree that decisions 19132 to 19134 have been implemented and propose their deletion to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and agree to the proposed draft decision contained in Annex 4 as amended in the meeting. And the amendment is that we, in Annex 4, Decision 20AA, the Secretariat shall A, publish a notification to the parties inviting them to share feedback, including examples as appropriate on the use of the CITES non-detriment finding NDF guidance with the Secretariat, preferably through the regional representatives of the Animals and Plants committees. And we delete II and continue as written in letter B and C, and then the other decision as well. Oh. Yes, and delete Annex 3. Yes, of course. We do not adopt that decision. Okay. I don't see anybody opposing, so I think this is on agenda item Doc 16 of the Plants and Animals Committee. So thank you very much. Now the next agenda item is agenda item 23 for the Animals Committee and agenda 28 for the, PC27 item 23 and AC33 item 28. It's on Appendix I, listed species, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce first the document of the Secretariat, and then we will hear the report of the Intersessional Working Group. So, Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document PC27, Doc 23.1, and AC33, Doc 28.1, an assessment of Appendix I listed species, provides an overview of the work implemented by the Secretariat under Decision 19.184. The Secretariat conducted detailed assessments on 10 species to assess the results of the rapid assessment of Appendix I listed species and shared them with the range states for additional information. The final version of the detailed assessments, which incorporated the information from range states, are available in the annex to the document and were shared with the Intersessional Working Group. The detailed assessments and the resulting recommendations for possible actions for the species included recurring themes such as demand reduction for illegal specimens, combating illegal wildlife trade, and the need for additional research on the species. The Secretariat is of the view that a large portion of the recommendations resulting from this assessment is already addressed in existing processes and resolutions, and presents some observations in paragraph 12 of the document. The Animals and Plants committees are invited to consider the recommendations contained in paragraph 13. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now give the floor to the Chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Assessment of Appendix I listed. I think it will be the representative of Asia to present document ACE 28.2.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank Secretariat and WCMC for the assistance in guiding the workshop, the working group. Sorry. In the 19th meeting of COP, adopted Decision 1984 and 1985, which is the assessment of the appendix listed species, and following by the establishment of Joint Intersessional Working Group with the mandate to review the result of the rapid assessment and focus on the 10 species, including 4 mammals, 1 species of bird, 3 reptiles, and 2 species of plant. To refine the methodology and its criterion for the carrying out of the assessment of species listed in Appendix I that may benefit from measures adopted by COP, and to formulate the draft recommendation as for considerations in this meeting. The membership that joined to the Intersessional Working Group represent from the Asia for chair and chair from PC from the Asia. The AC members represent of Africa, and the PC member represent from the North America. The parties who join 18 countries, and the IGO and NGO is 12. The Joint Intersessional Working Group held 2 online meetings with the same agenda to accommodate the different time zone. And there are several points that has been pointed in the document. In the regard of the methodology, we point 3 items regarding the biological information and commercial trade of information should be considered separately. The trade data for artificial propagation and captive breeding information should be included in the rapid assessment, as well as the consideration for domestic trade in the rapid assessment. All detailed information has been presented in the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Asia, for your report. Well, this is a strange topic, in my view, because it started out several years ago when Brazil was asking for a rapid assessment of Appendix I species to assess how these species have benefited from the Appendix I listing. And now we have here quite a detailed assessment of a range of Appendix I listed species, and I really don't know where we are going with this now, because the analysis done shows that basically we already have the processes and mechanisms if something is going wrong with an Appendix I species to act. So there are already a lot of processes out there, and I really don't know what we can do additionally on this matter, and I need now guidance from the members and from the room on how we continue, if we continue any work on that matter, especially what do we want to achieve with continuing work on that matter, because at the moment I don't really see very much where we are going. So that's my personal interpretation, but I leave it open now to the members of the Plants and Animals Committee to say their views, and I open the floor for any comments. Always remembering that if you don't say anything, silence is agreement, what is being proposed by the document, but the document specifically asks you to give us some guidance. So I don't think we can just glance over it like that, so I need to have some feedback sooner or later. I see Eugenia. Eugenia, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess I echo your sentiments on this one, that we have processes like the periodic review that can cover a lot of this sort of material. And I mean, the 10 examples that we chose, you know, some of those could well be worthy of periodic review. The Assam hare is one that comes to mind that was, you know, quite a clear example. You know, and so, yeah, I very much share your sentiments that this seems to be perhaps going round in circles, and we've got other mechanisms that can cope with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I see Asia. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As one of the co-chairs from the Plants Committee, and we co-chairs and the Secretariat, we held another, like the informal meeting, inter-meeting to discuss what will be going on. And at that time, and we also share the feelings and with you. It seems we don't know where this process will go, but it's still needed. But yeah, we still don't have time to really draft kind of decision to maybe just only find a way to how to discuss the way forward. So may I propose we can have some kind of in-session term for kind of the members and the committees to discuss, to draft some text maybe not the decision for these two committees to consider and then submit to the COP for consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Asia. Well, process-wise, it's a bit difficult. If we say we need to have a discussion on this and come up with the decisions, we would have time tonight from 5 to 7, and tomorrow morning from 7 to 9. That's the only times we have available in the joint meeting to have such a discussion. So it's quite restrictive if we need to have a working group to do that. That would be the only possibility to go forward if we think we need to have new decisions. If we feel that the decisions as they have been outlined are fulfilled, we can also say they have been fulfilled. And if there is appetite from other parties to continue the work, they would still be able to propose things for the next COP. So but it's up to the committees to decide how they want to proceed. So with this, I don't see anybody else from the committee asking for the floor. With this, I open the floor for observer parties, if they have views and suggestions on how to proceed this work. No, I see Germany. Where? Oh. Mexico has the floor, has asked for the floor. So Mexico, you are first.
Thank you, sir. We agree with you. We are sorry to say that we don't entirely agree with the working group conclusions. We think that there was a methodology proposed by Mexico that wasn't properly implemented. The 10 species that were chosen by the Secretariat for analysis were not really the right ones, because in keeping with the methodology proposed, they were supposed to be extreme examples. Instead, despite the suggestions made by Mexico in COP19 and in the Intersessional Working Group, where we proposed another list of species, there were intermediate choices made, geographically central rather than extreme. It was therefore very difficult to try and find examples that were typical of each quarter, if you like. Chair, we in Mexico, we've used the method we proposed successfully in order to identify species that require inclusion or transfer or deletion from the CITES appendices, as well as from our national lists of species that are at risk. Our approach has also allowed us to identify species that require specific additional measures. The original purpose of this exercise was to develop a rapid, practical method, a method that would enable us to find Appendix I listed species that had specific characters that would lead to standard recommendations being made per area, per quadrant. And that would mean that conservation activities could be proposed as well as decisions to be taken by the parties. If the Plants Committee decides to suspend this without trying with this species, without testing species proposed by Mexico, we could very well lose a valuable opportunity. In this respect, we would like to make it clear that the absence of satisfactory results here is due to the fact that the method was not properly implemented when it comes to the selection of the species that were studied. That is why we would like to make the following suggestion. We should have another round using the proper species. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mexico. I see Germany. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that Germany takes the floor in this joint meeting, we would like to thank the chairs for steering us through this meeting and wish you, Matthias, a successful retirement. And we also thank the Secretariat for preparing and the government of Switzerland for hosting this meeting. Thanks a lot to the Secretariat and the working group also for preparing the reports and for all the work that has been done so far on this process. We would like to comment on the recommendations in document 28.1. We note that a lot of capacities were spent to develop, discuss, and refine methodologies and complex criteria for this purpose, which is still ongoing. And at the same time, wild specimens of Appendix I species should not be in legal trade for commercial purposes, and potentially concerning trade in captive-bred animal specimens is covered by the process under Resolution Conf 17.7. The comprehensive assessments showed that for many species, habitat loss was identified as main threat, and recommendations to address this threat fall out of the mandate of CITES. Overall, the process so far revealed three main themes, which are more of general relevance rather than species-specific, which are demand reduction for illegal specimens, combating illegal wildlife trade, and further research on the biology of species. We therefore feel that the effort that has been and is put into this process under the current document is not proportionate to the net conservation benefit or additional value to already existing processes and resolutions. We therefore question the merit of continuing this work, taking into account the cost-benefit relationship and the fact that the process, as it is designed, can only identify species and suggest recommendations that largely fall out of the CITES mandate and which are then up to the range states to follow on or not. Therefore, we would propose not to continue with this process, while we would not opposing it if parties are of the view that the process really significantly contributes to improved conservation measures and would more specify its overall aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. I see India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India would like to place on record its appreciation to the works of the Joint Intersessional Working and the Secretariat in putting up the PC27 document 23.1 and 23.2, AC33 document 28.1 and 28.2 for discussion during this session. We wish to update on three faunal species indicated in the list in Table 1 on page 3 and page 4 of document 28.1, namely Caprolagus hispidus, second is Hilarcthoma alliances, and third is Erectoacalis imbricata. All these three species are listed in the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 of India, and thereby are accorded the highest degree of protection from hunting and trade. Therefore, these three species may continue to remain in Appendix I of CITES. With respect to paragraph 12 and its reference in recommendation paragraph 13b, we would agree with the opinion of the Secretary that the existing resolutions adopted by the parties, such as Resolution Conference 14.8, revision COP19, dealing with periodic review of species included in Appendices 1 and 2, Resolution Conference 17.7, revision COP19 on review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity, Resolution Conference 11.3, revision COP19 on compliance and enforcement, etc., already provides scope for review of species listed in Appendix 1. and also considering the budget constraints highlighted in the document, continuing the work on assessing Appendix I listed species as per decision 19.184 would serve very little additional benefit to species conservation. Additionally, parties may be encouraged for timely reporting trade data as per the annual reporting to CITES. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I see the United States. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States agrees with you and with the observations made by the Oceania region. We do not support the continued use of the current method, as both time and funds can be better served elsewhere, such as non-detriment findings for Appendix II species in international trade. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. I see Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to you and to our chair from the Plants Committee for steering us. And I am rather saddened to know that this is the last time I will be guided by your chairmanship in this space. But congratulations on your retirement, Matthias. Canada would like to thank the work of the working group and the Secretariat for preparing this document. And on reflecting on this exercise of assessing the species listed under Appendix I as it progressed from the rapid assessment to the more detailed assessments, we tend to agree with the Secretariat's observations in paragraph 12. This is in line with some of your observations and some of the points we heard from our colleagues from Germany and the United States. We understood this exercise as it was written. Its purpose was to identify conservation priorities based on a number of issues. And while the intent was laudable, we do tend to agree that many of the resolutions and processes in CITES already exist and sort of shine spotlights on some of these species issues or countries where implementation might need some capacity support or other supports. Ultimately, we also recognize that as the best protectors of their own wild flora and fauna, parties have the responsibility to identify and seek solutions to conservation issues for species within their jurisdiction, and of course to engage with CITES processes where those issues are related to international trade. And so in this regard, we do find that this exercise is moving a little bit beyond the scope and mandate, and we would like to recognize that for resources, like many of our partner countries have identified, for the resources involved, we do not see merit in continuing with this exercise. Rather, we would like to congratulate the extensive and diligent work that has already been done, and suggest that the committee agree to take note of the work that's already been undertaken, but to perhaps indicate that we have concluded with the actions in these decisions. We do take note of many of the methods and criteria that have been developed, and I am mindful of the comments made by Mexico in terms of the application of some of that. We think it would be beneficial for parties or regions to take note of some of these activities that have happened and to potentially use them in their own exercises as they seem fit. But in terms of decision 19.184, we believe it's worth recommending that it has been concluded. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Canada. And finally, I see the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank the Secretariat for preparing this document and greatly appreciate their efforts in conducting the detailed assessments, particularly in the absence of additional funding. We agree that CITES implementation has a role to play in addressing species recovery and note some useful observations arising from the assessments and by the intersessional working group. However, we align with the remarks made by yourself, the Secretariat, Germany, US and Canada around the added value, notably that the outcomes of the process demonstrated that many of the broader conservation actions identified perhaps fall outside the scope of this convention. And given the array of existing mechanisms already in place, such as the periodic review, which we feel in many cases are being underutilised, perhaps it would be better for us to focus our limited resources on implementing what we already have in place. Therefore, we would recommend and concur with others in not continuing this process and future assessment beyond COP20 or draft new decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. And finally, I have Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And Japan would like to express its appreciation for the effort made by the Secretariat to prepare this document. Japan believes that it's very important to review the implementation of the CITES regulations. However, Japan also highlights the paragraph 12D of the document, which is an observation by the Secretariat in relation to the process from the assessment of Appendix I listed species, provides minimal additional value to the existing process and the priority areas that are already outlined in a number of resolutions or adopted by the CITES parties. Furthermore, no funding was secured for the process, resulting in the Secretariat having to allocate staff time to finalize the process. So Japan therefore agree with the statement by other countries and also the Secretariat that there is no need to continue this process unless the funding is secured. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I now open the floor for some short interventions from observer organizations. I see WWF, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It was with personal sadness that we note that this is your last meeting. And it's also with personal sadness that we mark the departure of several members of the Secretariat. That said, we thank the Secretariat for this and all the agenda documents, and we thank you and your government for making this meeting possible. While we would hesitate to comment on the merits of using resources for one project over another, it does seem to us that each of the species included in this assessment tells a different story, and that the general conclusions regarding the need for continued demand reduction, continuing to combat illegal trade, addressing ex situ production, and so on, are hardly new or earth-shattering. So in brief, we agree with your conclusions and those of most of the speakers here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WWF. And finally, I have EASA. EASA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time EASA takes the floor, I would like to thank the Secretariat for their hard work in preparing for this meeting. And secondly, I wish you a successful last meeting as chair of this Animals Committee. I, for one, will miss the excellent collection of animal ties that you have always worn during these meetings. With regards to document 28.2, I would just like to provide a brief clarification to the reference made to EASA and WASA in paragraph 10.b. As member of the Intersessional Working Group, we participated in the online meeting and shared that an EASA ex situ program, as well as a WASA International Studbook, are in place for Helarctos malayanus, one of the selected species. These population management programs for this and also other species provide an overview of live specimens held by professional zoos and have extensive information on demographic and genetic population parameters, as well as the housing and care of the species in human care. To avoid misunderstanding, we would like to stress that these programs do not track information on laundering of animals. Other than that, we agree with the comments made by the parties this far, and thank you, Chair, for allowing us to make this clarification.
Thank you, EASA. So I don't see anybody else. Give me just a minute to wrap up here, and I will come back with a suggestion for a way forward. So thank you. Okay. Okay, so my suggestion would be that the Plants and Animals Committee agree that decisions 19184 and 185 have been completed and can be deleted. That's one comment coming out from the two committees. The second one would be to note the results of the rapid assessment carried out by the Secretariat and encourage parties concerned to note these recommendations coming out of this assessment. And the third recommendation would be to invite Mexico to make its methodology available through a notification to parties who wish to make further assessments along those lines. Would that suit Mexico's concerns? Because I haven't really heard a lot of appetite from parties to make another round. So that way your proposed methodology could still be used by parties who wish to make use of it. So Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are grateful for your proposal, and we think that this exercise could be useful to other parties, as it has been to Mexico. It's a rapid exercise with more detailed elements than other CITES processes. For example, when we compare it with the periodic review, this exercise allows one to meet other biological criteria and not just the IUCN risk categories. It allows us to have value on a national level, the risk status and the CITES appendices criterion, and we would welcome this, and we will assist any country in learning about the methodology. And we wish you all the best in your retirement. Thank you.
It's not quite done yet, huh? So okay. Thank you very much. So this is the conclusion on this agenda item on Appendix I species. So thank you very much. And we can move on to the next agenda item, which is PC27 agenda item 21 and AC33 agenda item 25 Ref 1 on the review of CITES provision related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source. And I would like to give the floor to the co-chair, Mexico. So Ezekiel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The report of the Joint Intersessional Working Group is present in document 27, PC27, Doc 21, and AC33, document 25. The working group was asked to A, consider the key elements in the current implementation of Article 7, paragraphs 4 and 5 for animals bred in captivity and plants artificially propagated in the current applicable resolutions. B, determine if there is a need to implement, say, paragraphs 4 and 5 differently for either animal or plant specimens that what is outlined in the existing resolutions, and provide recommendations to Standing Committee 78 together with any other scientific advice and guidance on CITES provisions concerning trade in non-wild specimens and report on progress to this joint session. Mr. Chair, the group worked through electronic means, starting with an extensive questionnaire, so its members, which was accompanied by a notification to the parties, 2024-021, and we received responses from 12 parties and 11 observers, and were able to identify some patterns and similarities. We share an integrated document with the working group requesting comments on 2 products. One, a summary of the responses to the main questions, and 2, a list of general observations and scientific aspects or advice. This joint intersessional group is closely related to the work of the group of the Standing Committee. We also held virtual meetings and shared relevant results with the chairs of the working group of the Standing Committee. In general, the consensus of the group leans towards a potentially lower conservation risk for the wild populations associated with trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source when robust systems and practices are in place. But some cautions against generalizing this across all species and circumstances. While there are successful examples of reduced conservation risk, challenges such as legal origin of parental stock, potential laundering, stock supplementation, inadequate regulatory frameworks, and varying impacts depending on the species and local conditions make it necessary to evaluate each case individually. There can be benefits to trading in non-wild specimens, such as reduced pressures on wild population and support for species recovery, function as reservoir for species reintroductions, but the actual impacts vary widely depending on the specific circumstances and management practices. There was a wide mention of enhancing conservation benefits and incentives for the species in their natural habitat from ex situ captive breeding and artificial propagation, especially in countries outside the species' natural distribution range. Also, more parity in the treatment of animals and plants is needed. These are some of examples of the scientific advice to be presented to the Standing Committee through its intersessional working group, which is consistent with the roadmap developed in Decision 19-179A. Mr. Chair, the intersessional working group presents the following recommendations for consideration by the Animals and Plants Committees. A, consider the information provided in the present document and its annexes. B, provide the scientific advice contained in Annex 2 to the Standing Committee through its intersessional working group on the review of CITES provisions related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source. And C, agree that Decision 19-180 has been implemented and recommend its deletion to the 20 meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mexico, for the introduction to that document. So our task is to consider the contents of the document and the annexes, and if we agree on them, provide the Annex 2 of this document to the Standing Committee through its intersession working group. And with this, I open the floor for any comments from members of the 2 committees. Noting that silence is agreement, this time. I open the floor to observer parties. I see India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India has stricter measures for protection of the animals and plants under its Wildlife Protection Act 1972. India has recently amended its Wildlife Protection Act and included the provisions of the CITES Convention, thereby according protection to CITES listed specimens. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972 prohibits removal of any animal and plant from any protected area in India. Risks to a specimen in trade when not collected from wild is very minimal, and trade of such specimens that are not from wild could also reduce the pressure on wild population of the species. However, controls and strict enforcement measures for ensuring that mixing of wild species trade under the garb of non-wild specimens needs to be in place for such risks to remain minimal. Additionally, the species which are under threatened categories and difficult to breed or difficult to propagate artificially need monitoring. Further, we also wish to seek a clarification as to whether the mandate set out under paragraph 4A and B of PC27, Doc 21, AC33, Doc 25, pertaining to decision 19.180 has been accomplished or not, as the scientific advice contained in Annex 2 of this document does not bring out clear recommendations for these mandates, especially with respect to paragraph 4B. Thank you, Chair.
May I ask the chair of the Standing Committee Working Group to maybe explain why it doesn't really fit the decision? Because I think we have agreed you have agreed on a roadmap and we have followed that one. So that's probably why it doesn't really 100% fit. Or may I put you on the spot? Sorry.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to miss you after all, Matthias. Thank you. And thank you, India, for your point about the mandate in 19.180. And I think what I would like to reflect is that decision 19.180 was part of a suite of decisions on this topic of trade in non-wild species. And in that suite of decisions, there were a number of interconnected discussions happening. And so when my co-chair and I worked on a roadmap with the help of the Standing Committee's Intersessional Working Group on this suite of decisions, we tried to parse out elements of it so that we could have a fairly clear and consistent and logical conversation, and so that we would not have working groups working in parallel trying to address the same issues. And so in that sense, in the discussion with my co-chair of the Intersessional Working Group, and then in the discussion with the co-chairs of the Plants and Animals Intersessional Working Group, we were suggesting that it would be most helpful to the overall attainment of this suite of decisions if we could get that scientific aspect and that scientific advice from this working group, knowing that the Standing Committee Working Group is also responsible for looking at this article and implementation of these articles and trying to bring that together. And so, I mean, if the committees had specific advice on the implementation of these articles, I'm sure the Intersessional Working Group would be very happy to receive it. But regardless, we feel that the information that this committee can provide on those scientific pieces will allow that robust discussion to happen in the Intersessional Working Group of the Standing Committee on this piece, such that the intent of this suite of decisions will be achieved, we hope. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think that clarifies what the scientific committees can really contribute. And that's what they have done now in this working group, and it will hopefully support the Standing Committee Working Group to look at these issues that you are missing. So I hope that answers India's questions. Okay, I see China has asked for the floor. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. China wishes to express its support for the position expressed by a number of parties that trade in specimens from captive breeding programs which operate and robust regulatory systems and are effectively monitored and controlled, can contribute to conservation of wild populations. We note that economic benefits can remove pressure on the harvest of wild populations that can lead to their recovery. We wish to underscore our agreement with the points made in the summary that if trade in specimens that are not of wild source, such as captive breeding or artificial propagation, were discontinued, it is likely that specimens of the same species would come under greater trade pressure. We believe that captive harvesting or artificial propagation allows for sustainability with affecting wild populations. China notes with concern, however, that the remarks made by several NGOs alleging that trade in certain high-value species can undermine enforcement efforts are not underpinned by rigorous scientific studies. We wish to express our view that all decision-making under CITES be conducted according to the best available science and analyzed in an objective manner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, China, for your comments, which are well noted. I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer organizations. You have the floor. I see Ornamental Fish International, I think is correct one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm speaking also on behalf of the European Pet Organization. We support the marking of decision 19.180 as complete and the continued work highlighted in decision 19.179. However, we would like it recorded in the minutes that any future work on this topic takes into consideration the following areas. 1, the limitations of current marking requirements of Appendix I listed specimens not of wild source for small-bodied animals, such as most tropical fish, amphibians and reptiles, and the impact this might have on the availability of captive-bred specimens. And 2, the challenges for breeding operations in demonstrating legal acquisition of founder stock for newly listed species that have been bred for an extended period of time pre-CITES, and how this might impact the availability of captive-bred specimens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think this is also well noted. And I now have UEBT, Union for Ethical Biotrade. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note, I think there's been a mix-up of the place settings. I'm actually with Whale and Dolphin Conservation, but I will continue. So as this is the first time that Whale and Dolphin Conservation has taken the floor, we would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the agenda documents, the Government of Switzerland for hosting this meeting, and also the Chair for your years of hard work. Whale and Dolphin Conservation would like to draw attention to Annex 2 in PC Doc 21 and AC Doc 25 Rev 1, which details scientific advice on conservation risks associated with non-wild trade, including unsustainable stock supplementation and actual versus perceived conservation benefits. These are key concerns for species such as cetaceans, which are difficult to breed and maintain in captivity, and for which demand for live animals cannot be met solely by captive-produced specimens. In locations where wild-sourced individuals are captured to supplement captive populations, we are seeing tangible effects on wild populations. Analysis of catch statistics of small cetaceans along the Pacific coast of central Japan
indicates declines in the populations of multiple species, and evidence shows that catch levels for several species are limited by animal abundance rather than quotas. We believe that species-specific considerations are vital when considering non-wild trade. Cetaceans often rely on complex social bonds, specialized skills, and peak physical fitness for survival, meaning the potential conservation benefits of non-wild trade to wild populations are extremely limited. And this is without addressing the significant welfare considerations, something which we note were not factored into the consultation. We believe that captive breeding and trading is not appropriate for all species and encourage the Animals Committee to give full consideration to the need for case-by-case assessments of the conservation risk when making recommendations to the Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And last speaker on my list is Born Free Foundation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add our congratulations to you on your retirement and our thanks to the Secretariat and host government for the organisation of this meeting. We broadly support the recommendations in AC33 Doc 25 while agreeing with the concerns expressed by the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Organisation. We strongly urge the committees to give due consideration to the various and significant negative impacts on wild populations that may be associated with commercial captive breeding operations, which are noted in Annexes 1 and 2 of the document. As a general point, we note that Appendix 1 and 2 species have been listed as such due to the agreement by parties that they are under significant threat from trade. It therefore follows that the potential negative consequences of captive breeding for commercial purposes through continued removal of wild-caught individuals to supplement captive populations, the laundering of wild-caught specimens through captive production systems, the stimulation of demand which may then be supplied from offtake from wild specimens, the potential introduction of invasive species and spread of diseases, and the potential inappropriate application of source and purpose codes, all these things represent, to a greater and lesser extent, a conservation risk. Therefore, such operations should only be approved by parties when these risks can be conclusively shown to be absent or appropriately mitigated against. Thank you.
Thank you, Born Free. So with this, I think we can conclude on this document, and I would suggest the following conclusion. Having considered the information provided in the present document and its annexes, the Plants and Animals Committee agreed to provide the scientific advice contained in Annex 2 to the Standing Committee through its intercession working group on the review of CITES provisions related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source, and agree that Decision 19180 has been implemented and recommends its deletion to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I don't see anybody from the committees opposing, so I think that's how we conclude this matter. Thank you very much. So the next agenda item is document PC27 Doc 37, AC33 Doc 46, informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations. I give the floor to the Secretariat. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat refers to document PC27 Doc 37 and AC33 Doc 46 entitled Informal Review Mechanism for Existing and Proposed Annotations. Pursuant to Decision 19.266 and 19.267 on Informal Review Mechanism for Existing and Proposed Annotations, the Secretariat has been requested to develop a proposal on the feasibility and requirements for an informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations. Since SC77, the Secretariat undertook the study on the feasibility and requirement for an informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations. The final study is annexed to the present document. The work was made possible through the generous financial support of Switzerland. The purpose of a review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations is to support parties in ensuring consistency in the annotations included in the appendices of the Convention and to harmonize their interpretation and implementation, thus mitigating risks to deviate from the Convention and its fundamental principles. The Secretariat is of the view that the study provides important background information on the subject matter for the parties and constitutes a useful basis for discussion. The Secretariat further considers that it is to be envisaged as work in progress and that there would be value in elaborating various aspects, including but not limited to the implications of such a mechanism and potential terms of reference, or a rapid guide developing criteria to guide the review of annotations. The Animals and Plants Committee are invited to take note of the Secretariat's progress in the implementation of Decision 19.266, consider the report annexed to the present document, and provide comments on the scientific aspects that should be expanded and taken into account when conducting an informal review of existing and proposed annotations to inform the Secretariat's reporting to the Standing Committee at its 78th session. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we are asked to take note of the progress and provide comments on the scientific aspects of the report annexed. So I open the floor for comments from members of the Plants and Animals Committee. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The North America region appreciates the Secretariat's effort in these matters and supports forwarding the report included in the annex to document PC27, Doc 37, AC33, Doc 46 to the Standing Committee for its consideration at SC78. We also agree that a number of issues around this effort, including implications of such a mechanism, the range of issues and species specimens considered under different annotations and possible terms of reference or development of a rapid guide should be considered more fully. While we support continuing to explore this issue, we generally oppose the creation of a new permanent CITES body and any options that will result in additional cost or stretch current resources should be subject to external funding. Should a group be established by the Standing Committee to perform a rapid technical review and analysis, we could support the Scientific Committee's involvement through a representative of each one. Additionally, we believe that the discussion should include consideration of whether an entirely new process is needed, or if the goals of the review mechanism could be achieved with better capacity building and sharing best practices in drafting annotations or enable ad hoc advisory group. Focus on the existing guidance in Resolution Conf 1121 on use of annotations in Appendix I and II. Although we recognize that there have been issues with particular annotations in some circumstances, we appreciate the flexibility of the current approach and will not want the potential for finding creative solutions to be unduly compromised by an overly rigid process or approach. Finally, we recommend that the following PC27, AC33, any comments received be forwarded to the Standing Committee Annotations Working Group for its consideration, and if appropriate, the Secretariat be requested to issue a notification to the parties summarizing reactions received from the Animals and Plants Committees and inviting parties to provide perspectives in order to help inform the Secretariat's report to SC78 and ensure the opportunity for robust discussions at that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, North America. I see Europe. Europe, you have the floor.
A review process for annotations is definitely required, but if possible, this task should be assigned to a working group instead of establishing a new committee. In regard to the procedure for the review process, I agree that the proposed way forward, as detailed in point 25 and of AC33 Doc 46, is a good way forward. In order to maintain an overview, it would be best to amend Resolution 11.21 Ref COP 19 to either include or refer to all recommendations that provide relevant guidance on the inclusion and use of annotations. A mandatory review process for annotations before a proposal can be submitted might complicate the submission of listing proposals and motivate parties to submit listing proposals without an annotation, what might require additional ad hoc negotiations at the COP. In contrast, a review of annotations between the submission and the time of the COP has the potential to facilitate attempts to find a broad support for the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. Other members having a view? I see Central, South America and the Caribbean.
Sí, muchas gracias, señor.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. We are grateful for the work done, but we think it is suitable that we evaluate the need to set up this additional review mechanism. Given the burden of work for parties and for the Secretariat, and considering that the existing mechanisms allow us to carry out reviews of annotations, and we can have a working group on annotations and the review of proposals from the Secretariat in accordance with Resolution 5.20 Rev 17, which has a wide-ranging mandate. And the parties, in accordance with Article 15, can propose amendments when they feel it is necessary and have sufficient time before each COP to carry out the review. And also, should problems of application or compliance arise, they can be discussed at the Plants and Animals Committees, at the Standing Committee, or at the conferences of the parties, and concerns that arise can be dealt with in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Central, South America and the Caribbean. So I open the floor now to observer parties. And observer organizations. I see the UK. UK, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Secretariat for this update. And thank you for providing the discussion points in the document. We do agree with some of the comments we've heard so far regarding concerns on extra resources and potential burdens this could cause. We are supportive of a review of existing annotations, as there are many implementation challenges, although we do see that these implementation challenges are being worked through, or certain aspects are being worked through on the annotations working group. However, we could also support that the Secretariat issue a notification to see whether there are other implementation issues with annotations to widen the remit of the annotations working group. However, if the remit did expand and it could become a very substantial workload, we would then need to identify a clear work plan and method of prioritization for the working group to achieve that mandate. We would also consider that if this went forward, it would be preferable to have two groups, one looking at flora annotations and one looking at fauna annotations, to ensure that there is the right composition of experts in the group, as the annotation challenges have different complexities. In terms of the review of proposals for annotations or amendments to annotations, so the review mechanism that is being proposed, we agree that actually one of the most suitable ways forward could be to encourage parties to submit proposals to the Animals and Plants Committee ahead of the COP to ensure that there is feedback from parties, including on the annotation proposed, to see if that would create any implementation challenges or if it is an appropriate annotation, as we find that some of the other solutions offered in the document could potentially be more burdensome and difficult to establish in terms of setting up new working groups, or it would also be hard to include this work to the annotations working group given the timeframes available to review proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I see Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, perhaps I'll preface my comment by noting that what you are seeking are the advice of the committees on the scientific aspects. And I recognize that for Canada, when reading this document as an observer party, we tended to focus on the process that was being provided and some of the reasons for having such a mechanism. So like what was expressed by the UK, one of the main reasons we see value in some form of mechanism is because of implementation issues that arise with annotations. And so our comments are likely comments that we will again direct to the Standing Committee when this is taken up. But I will note that it has been useful to see this document in advance, and so the proposal to have a notification so that the Secretariat might get some of these perhaps more implementation-based views from parties could be useful in their preparation for the Standing Committee meeting as they refine and continue this work. In that regard, just the one additional comment we would make about such a review is that it's important for us to emphasize the inclusion of bracketed annotations in any kind of review process that may be agreed. As noted in the document with relation to developing guidance for the publication of appendices, so this was SC74 Doc 85, there are issues with inconsistencies with quota annotations, either between annotations or for the same annotation in 3 official languages. And so a review of this type of text and developing guidance so that we have consistent language in these types of annotations in the future, we see benefit from. Again, this is more from a legal and implementation perspective than a scientific perspective, but that is still a comment that we will also submit in the future to the Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Now I come to HSI. HSI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this is the first time that Humane Society International is taking the floor, I would, of course, like to thank our hosts in Geneva. It's good to be back here. And with respect to your retirement, Mr. Chairman, as one who has reached a stage in life where I don't always like to be reminded of the passage of time, I am very happy to hear from what you told me outside that you will still be with us for a while longer because you will be reporting on this committee to the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So while I certainly wish to offer you the very best congratulations for your retirement, I hope that you will accept them as post-dated. Anyway, this intervention is being made on behalf of Humane Society International, Animal Welfare Institute, Born Free Foundation, and Species Survival Network. We urge the scientific committees to oppose the formulation of an additional review mechanism for annotations. Not only is such a mechanism unnecessary, as there are already ample opportunities for commenting on proposed annotations as part of the existing review and consultation processes for CITES listing proposals. It amounts to an intrusion on the sovereign right of parties to propose listing proposals as they see fit and have them reviewed by the technical committees and decided upon upon by the other sovereign parties to the Convention. Such a mechanism would amount to adding a layer of top-down bureaucracy to a listing process that already works well and provides ample opportunities for comment and review. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I see IWMC. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. To save time, I will abstain from extending my best wishes, but I will do so personally later. The process that is suggested seems to me complicated. Annotations, which are necessary and useful, we think, first of all, that that is the role of the Secretariat to verify when proposals are made. And we know that the Secretariat had started a review of the revisions to the appendices and to consult to check there was alignment and harmony, where sometimes you could have slightly different wording which would be working on the same subject. And when it comes to following on from that, there is a working group on annotations, and maybe we should task them with a mandate that is a little larger so that we can unify annotations and align them and potentially work on the implementation of the annotations and their application later on. If there are issues with that, it's difficult to resolve them in advance, so maybe a notification to the parties would be useful so that we know what the real problems encountered are. But to set up another group does not seem useful to us. And if the Secretariat, when new proposals are made, must make recommendations, if they then have to make them on the annotations. Thank you.
Thank you. I did WMC. I see WWF, and then I will wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. We would broadly align ourselves with the comments of HSI, not even so much on the question of what's the sovereign right of parties and what isn't, but it's not apparent to us that any failings in the current approach are such that we need such an elaborate mechanism going forward. We think that there are enough checks and balances through the Secretariat's own comments on proposals, through parties' comments, through the independent analyses that are done and so on, that this is really bringing in an extra layer of work that isn't really necessary, and we have managed up until now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, WWF. Give me a minute and I will come back with conclusions. Okay, I'm back. So I would propose that the Plants and the Animals Committee take note of the progress in the document presented and the comments made on the floor. And then also invite the Secretariat to publish a notification asking parties to make comments on the document here before us and other issues concerning annotations for consideration to the SC78. I think we have heard several voices asking for such or seeing use in such a notification, so that's what I would propose. Do I see agreement? Okay, perfect. So that's the conclusion of this document. Okay, we still have several agenda items, so if you take the floor, please be really concise on the following ones and only take the floor if you really think we have to change anything to what is before us. So we move now to the agenda item PC27 22 and AC33, no, PC27 item 20, AC33 item 22 on specimen produced through biotechnology. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Secretariat is speaking on behalf of the Chair of the working group, the Intersessional Working Group on Specimens Produced Through Biotechnology, and refers to item 20 of the Plants Committee and agenda and item 22 of the agenda of the Animals Committee entitled Specimens Produced Through Biotechnology. The chair of the working group would like to thank the committees for the appointment of focal points to work with the working group. The chair recognizes the delay in meeting and fulfilling the mandate of the working group, but confirms that they will maintain contact with members of the working group and continue with discussions following the meetings of the committees. As was informed at the last meeting of the committees in June 2023, and with reference to decision 19163, the Secretariat estimates that the cost of a meeting to hold the discussions mentioned in discussion 19.161 and develop guidance on the application of the amendment to resolution 9.6 Rev COP19 on trade in easily identifiable parts and derivatives would be an estimate of $80,000. The Secretariat has not yet obtained the funds necessary to organize this meeting. The chair will also will propose to the group the holding of an online meeting to continue its work and debate the elements in decision 19.163. The working group will continue its work and inform on the outcomes at the next meeting of the Standing Committee. The chair of the working group invites the committees to take note of this report of the working group on specimens produced through biotechnology. Thank you.
Okay, so this being a standing committee working group, this is really a progress report for us to note, and I open the floor for any comments. I don't see any comments from the members. Observer parties? Observer organizations? So I think we are all in agreement to note the document and thank the Secretariat and the working group chair for its report. So thank you very much. So with this, we are moving to botanical and zoological nomenclature, and I would like to ask the chair of the nomenclature specialist for fauna to introduce document 47.1 on nomenclature of Appendix III listing. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me start with thanks and best wishes from both nomenclature specialists to all involved in this meeting. Document PC27 Doc 40.1, also document AC33 Doc 47.1, reports on progress to consider the possible implementation of nomenclature changes proposed in the scientific literature that affect listings in Appendix III. Following the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee and the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee last year, an intersessional joint working group was established to consider this matter, as well as the subject of nomenclatural change affecting higher taxa listed in the appendices, which will be reported under the next agenda item. This working group, comprised of over 80 participants from the committees, the parties, and observer organizations, conducted its business over email earlier this year. It considered the instructions in decision 18.313, revised at COP19, to evaluate how nomenclature changes may affect Appendix III listings and to propose further guidance and recommendations on how such changes are to be handled. This document incorporates the views expressed by the working group members and received significant input from the Secretariat. There was general understanding among the working group members that the inclusion, deletion, and any amendments to Appendix III listings are the unilateral responsibility of the listing party under Article Roman 16 of the Convention. Correspondingly, this appears to preclude the possibility for the nomenclature specialists to directly recommend updates to how species or higher taxa are listed in Appendix III. Instead, the appropriate course of action appears to be that the nomenclature specialists keep track of any possible nomenclature changes proposed by the scientific community that affect listings in Appendix III, do that as part of their regular work on tracking nomenclature changes affecting taxa listed in Appendices 1 and 2, and then inform the Secretariat accordingly. The Secretariat will then inform the listing party or parties of the taxa affected and guide the party to update their Appendix III listing if and when the party sees merit in updating. The annex to the present document contains suggested amendments to the current versions of Resolution Conf 9.25 on implementation of the Convention for Species in Appendix III and to Resolution Conf 12.11 on standard nomenclature. And these suggested amendments would clarify the respective responsibilities and mandates to establish and implement such a process. This would enable parties who listed species in Appendix III to ensure those listings are up to date with current scientific nomenclature and consistent with the nomenclature used in CITES Appendices 1 and 2. We therefore invite the committees to consider these suggested amendments and, if considered appropriate, submit them to the Standing Committee for their consideration. And with these outcomes, we consider that Decision 18.313 Rev COP19 has been implemented, and we propose its deletion at the next conference of the parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist of Fauna. With this, I think we have a clear mandate what we are asked to be doing, to be saying. So I open the floor for any comments from members of the Animals Committee. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region would like to propose additional amendments to the annex of the document. So I will start with suggestions on Resolution 9.25, Rep. Cop 18 on page 9 of the English version. In paragraph 1, at the end of 1A double Roman I, at the very end, to include the expression, comma, as appropriate, when it says, consult the nomenclature specialist of the Animals Committee or Plants Committee as appropriate. That's our suggestion. Also on paragraph capital B, at the end of capital B, it says, if the species concerned, sorry about that, because I received my the agreements in the region. In the previous one, capital A, it says, if the species concerned is included in one of the standard lists or names or taxonomic references adopted by the Conference of the Parties, the reference citation and name provided by that reference should be submitted. And we delete the word and, because we're going to add a new C. So we go to B, and in B, we prefer to delete the very last part. So it should say, if the species concerned is not included in one of the adopted standard references, parties should provide references as to the source of the name used, and to delete after comma either the time of the request within 90 days before, and so on. And then we add and the new C would say, if there are nomenclature uncertainties concerning the species, comma, parties should consult the nomenclature specialist of the Animals Committee or the Plants Committee as appropriate, semicolon, and it continues. And in the following double I, in the same place, to delete at the end, derive from the species. So it should say any readable, recognizable parts and derivatives to be included, comma, unless it intends to include all readily recognizable parts and derivatives. Full stop. That's the end. Then on paragraph 6, that says, starting with urges parties, if we go to subparagraph B, we would like to strike out the words impacting and substitute by affecting species. Is in the second line. And at the very end, in the same paragraph, after to use certificates of origin, comma, and proceed to amend the Appendix III listing, comma, if needed. So it would read, for clarity, B would say, inform the Secretariats and the Animals and Plants Committee about any taxonomic or nomenclature changes affecting species included in Appendix III to determine whether these changes would also result in changes in distribution that would affect the determination of which countries will be required to issue certificates of origin, comma, and proceed to amend the Appendix III listing, comma, if needed. Then, on paragraph C, there's also a number of changes. It should say, respond in a timely manner to request from the Secretariat on proposed nomenclature changes and to include for Appendix III list species and strike proposed and include recommended by the Animals or Plants Committee through its process and include for updating current standard nomenclatural references and to strike out to identify and address nomenclature issues. And it continues in accordance with Resolution Conf 12.1, Rec Cop 19 on the standard nomenclature, and to strike out or to delete and may result in changes in distribution that potentially alter the scope of protection for fauna and flora, inclusion or deletion of species or populations includes in Appendix III, to delete that part, and to continue to inform the amendments to Resolution Conf 12.11, Rep Cop 19, and also delete any action to be taken by the party that lists the species in Appendix III, and to include proceed to amend the Appendix III listing if needed. Sorry for so many changes. I will now continue with proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 12.11, starting in number 2, which says recommends that. If we go to paragraph F, in paragraph F at the middle of the paragraph, to include after appendices, and if that is the case, to include a range state party or the depository government as it is, so to include range state party or before the expression the depository government. That's it for F. For paragraph G, that's the last one, in the first line, it should say, if the Animals or Plants Committee become informed of taxonomic or nomenclature changes in a published taxonomic authority, and in parentheses, see definition in paragraph 2H, and the strike proposed in the scientific literature. And we agree with the changes, and at the very end, to add after Appendix III, the following text, and in consultation with the nomenclature specialist, as appropriate, comma, encourage the party or parties to revise the nomenclature of their Appendix III listing in accordance with the procedure described in Resolution Conf 9.25, Rep Cop 18, on the implementation of the Convention for Species in Appendix III. Those are the changes, Mr. Chair. I know there are many we will provide in written to the Secretariat, and thank you for the long intervention.
Thank you, North America. That is indeed quite a bunch of changes, and I think at least myself, I have had problems following. So having them in writing would be very helpful. The question is how we deal with those many changes, but I will come back to you, and I open the floor to Europe.
Perhaps to add to your last comments, I would also be happy to read this text, because I'm not able to comprehend what consequences all these changes really have. So if there's a way to read them before we make a decision, it would be quite helpful. With the acceptance of including a species in Appendix III, CITES also takes some responsibility for keeping the nomenclature up to date. Accordingly, a close collaboration between the party which lists the species and in Appendix III and the nomenclature specialist is recommendable, and I support the proposed modifications in Resolution 925 RevCop 18 and Resolution 12.11 in RevCop 19, with one exception, and that is that the standard nomenclature for an Appendix III species should be proposed together with the submission of the proposal and not at least 90 days before the listing comes into effect, as it is essential for the scope of the listing and should be therefore clearly defined at the time of the submission. To this end, I recommend to delete the words "or within the 90 days before the listing takes effect" from the proposed additions to Resolution 925. Thank you.
Can you maybe say more clearly where you want that change to be made exactly?
Page 9, point B, so E, I, B. But it's perhaps easier to find, to look at the lower end of page 9. And there just delete the words "or within the 90 days before the listing takes effect."
Thank you, Europe. If we adopt the changes proposed by North America, that this would already be stricken out, but then the whole thing would be struck out. So we will have to see. So thank you. I know what you wanted to change. Okay, anybody else asking for the floor from the members? Okay, so I open the floor. Oh, Central, South America and the Caribbean has asked for the floor. You have the floor.
Sí, gracias, señor presidente.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On document 40.2, on a higher tax on listings in the appendices. I'll wait till we get to the next item then.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are not quite there yet. Thank you. So anybody else on Appendix 3 listings? Okay, I open the floor for observer parties. Okay, so I open the floor for observer organizations. Dallas Safari Club, you have the floor.
Sorry, Chair.
Okay, so that may have been an error. So I see Conservation Force asking for the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And just a comment on page 9, letter number 1A3, when it says it's national regulations. In reality, it should read national laws and regulations, because this is what Article 16, paragraph 4 is requiring. It's not only regulations, but also laws. If you don't have a national law, you cannot, in theory, list a species in Appendix 3. And apart from that, this is also a potential concern, because if taxonomy changes, most likely the listing party should go back to Parliament to change the law. So this has to be taken into consideration. So the first comment is about adding the word laws before regulations, because this is what Article 16 says. And the second is a concern about the process, which could be quite lengthy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conservation Force. Okay, so for your change, that would be a change that has not been proposed so far, and to have to be able to do that, I think I would need also to have some support from members or a party on that. Maybe the nomenclature specialist, did you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not opposed to the Conservation Force's proposed amendment. However, it is completely about the implementation of Appendix III rather than nomenclatural matters. So it's up to the parties. This may be something that could be recommended to the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist. I tend to agree. It goes further than what we were asked to be looking at. So I really would need to have some support from a party to this amendment to put that forward. So at the moment I don't see. I see Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and we congratulate you on a successful career, and we wish you well in your forthcoming retirement. Thank you very much for the wonderful handling of the business of this committee. So, since this is the first time Zimbabwe is taking the floor, we wish to also express our gratitude to the host government, the government of Switzerland, and also appreciate the Secretariat for the wonderful work. The submission or the proposed amendment suggested by Conservation Force Chair, I think it makes sense because that is how we work. We should make reference to the laws because they take precedence as opposed to having regulations only. So I think it makes it more complete. Thank you very much. That's our submission.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. And I mean, it's correct that in Article 16 it says copy of all domestic laws and regulations applicable to the protection of such species. So I think it perfectly makes sense to use the same wording. So I think that change we can propose. But it is now 5 minutes to 5 o'clock, and I don't really see that we can this topic, we can finish all the changes that have been proposed by North America. So I would suggest that you provide this in writing to us, so that we can send it out to or put it on the website for everyone to have a look at, and we can come back to that matter first thing tomorrow or whenever we decide that we continue with nomenclatural issues. Okay?
We can do a conduct for that. Yeah.
Yes, okay. It will be in the form of a ComDoc so that everyone can have a look at it. Okay. Anything else on this? So I think we can already now agree on the change proposed by Europe and the change proposed by Conservation Force, and in relation to the North American regions amendments, we will have to have a look at them and then come back tomorrow first thing in the morning. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. We agree that the ComDoc could be a good way forward, flagging who proposed those changes, so it will be easier when it's revised to be clear on the approval of the ComDoc, because there are 3 different sources of changes. Just flagging the amendments.
No, we will be clear that we only have a ComDoc on the changes proposed by the North American region. Okay? Good. Okay, we will add the changes proposed by Europe and by Conservation Force in the ComDoc so that everyone sees them, and you will see who has made which comment changes. Okay? Okay. So with this, I think we can close to today's meeting. No?
We're just saying that so we can't.
Okay. And as a general comment, if you have substantive proposals to decisions or recommendations for all of that we will be looking at tomorrow, please send them to us beforehand so that we are prepared, that we don't run into the same issue as we have on this document. So if you have substantive changes to be made to the conclusions and the decisions that we are proposing, please send them to the Secretariat beforehand. Now, in 30 minutes, Karen is advising me, so please be quick in doing so. Okay.
Because we only have one day left.
Okay, good. I think that concludes today's meeting. Are you in agreement? I have forgotten one very important thing. On Saturday at 6 o'clock in the Botanical Garden, Switzerland is inviting Animals and Plants Committee to a reception. So not just the members, it's the whole crowd here that is being invited to a reception on Saturday at 6 o'clock in the Botanical Gardens. So if you have spare time at that moment, you are kindly invited to join us in the Botanical Garden. With this, I now really close. Now I'm really allowed to close the meeting, so have a nice evening and see you tomorrow morning.